We're at the 25th CROI, and we're here with Matt and Alka, and they're from NYU, and they're both young investigators, but you're a younger investigator, and she's an older young investigator. Okay. So I guess that's right, because you're actually his mentor, and you're the mentee.
Yes,
correct.
Exactly.
So that's how quickly we're turning the roles, okay?
Very true.
Which is really exciting. So I like this. So. First of all, I'd like to give you each the opportunity to introduce yourself a little more further, your full name and everything else. So we'll start with you, Matt.
All right, so yeah, I'm Matt Generoso. I'm an undergraduate at NYU. Alka's my mentor. We work together at NYU Langone Health. I'm in her lab in the pediatric infectious disease department, and we're mostly focused on studying HIV.
I'm Alka Khaitan. I'm a pediatric infectious disease physician at NYU Langone Health. I've been working with HIV for over a decade, and my main interests are studying inflammation in pediatric HIV.
Mm-hmm. And that's the other reason we liked your possibility of presenting with us, because we didn't do a lot in pediatrics, and we wanted to make sure that that's one of my goals, because I think it's not because it's underrepresented, which it is, but because it's really important, because it's the youth, it's the children.
Exactly.
And there's no reason that we can't do better than we are today for the youth. So why don't we let you start out with setting up what your work is.
Right, so I'm presenting a poster. The title is SCD163 T-cell activation and disease progression in perinatally infected HIV-positive children. And so generally what the work is about is we have this cohort of children from Kenya. For this analysis, we're looking at the age 5 to 20 group, but 5 to 20 years old, I mean. And what we're really focused on in this analysis is levels of immune activation. And the way we're quantifying that is by levels of SCD163, which is a marker of monocyte activation. So I did a few experiments to look at the levels of that in the plasma of these patients. And then we further correlated that with disease progression, T-cell activation, and other markers of HIV progression.
And you're working with both innate and acquired immune system.
Exactly, because SCD163, as I said, is a monocyte activation marker, which is part of the innate immune system, but then we also correlated it with levels of T-cell activation measured by on CD4 and CD8 T cells.
How did you come to the conclusion that this marker was the right one?
That's a good question. So, well, we've done a lot of experiments with the same cohort, so we've published a lot of different results for these patients. But with SCD163, I want to say it was this past summer, we did the experiment on that, and we determined that one was the right one when we looked at how it correlated with these other markers, and we saw a bunch of relationships that we thought were really significant, especially to determine HIV pathogenesis and how it affects the immune system.
And the other reason we chose this marker is in adults. A lot of pediatric data we do derive from adult studies, and soluble CD163 has directly correlated and predicted all-cause mortality in adults. And there's not really much data at all in children. And so we think this will add a lot to the literature. We don't have enough prospective data to link it to mortality, but we think this is evidence that we're seeing similar findings in children as is occurring in adults, which is scary when you think about how young they are.
I think your work is great, and I think our audience will probably want to know more about you guys, because our concerns are that we get more qualified people into the field, people that are smart, because this is a very complicated disease. And I don't think there's enough effort being put into pediatrics, as we talked earlier. I'm kind of championing the cause of pediatric awareness, pediatric AIDS awareness and advocacy. And our groups meet with pharma to talk through what they're doing. And most of the companies recognize that there is a need to do more research in pediatrics. And of course, it's always like phase 4, it's after the drug's approved, because they first want to get it approved. It'd take too long to go through the rigors of pediatrics.
Right.
But this is interesting because, I'm one that believes in markers, which is really, and defining the best markers, which is why I asked that question. And there are so many out there, and I think the question I always have is, are there markers we don't know about? And there always are. There's
Of
always
course,
more out there.
of course.
And but so we just have to keep on looking, and then find out what they're going to help us define in the future. So, but as far as you guys, I mean, you're very basic at this point.
That's one way of putting it, yeah.
So tell us what got you excited about doing science, number one, and then number two in this direction.
Definitely. So it's a good preparation for me because I'm applying to medical school this summer. They're going to ask me that a lot. So yeah, I'm an undergraduate. I'm a junior at NYU, and I'm majoring in biology and public health. And I really decided to pursue that course of study because I think while all fields of science definitely have their perks, I like that those two are applicable to all kinds of patients. Like there's no niche group. You can apply those things to anyone. You can help really anyone with those two fields. And especially down the line, now that I'm doing research in HIV with Alka, with HIV, there's so many patients out there that don't have access to the healthcare that they need. And I've always been interested in science, so if what I can do to help those patients is do research in a lab and help further the discussion on those things, that's really why I've been kind of pursuing that.
It would certainly be worth to say that you're passionate about your work.
That's one way of putting it, yeah.
I have only found one person that wasn't that I've ever interviewed.
It's not worth doing if you're not passionate about it.
But I mean, it used to say people shouldn't love their work. I think they should. I think they should love and be passionate about their work and be excited about it.
Yeah, I agree.
And always hope that that you will answer a question, which you're doing.
Yes,
So,
I agree.
So, and you're also a young investigator, but you've been down the line a little ways. You're kind of the end of your stint as a young investigator, right?
I'm getting there.
So what got you into the field?
So, it's kind of a long chain of processes with you do residency, then you do pediatrics. I've always loved working with children, and I came into infectious disease because I like public health, I love science, I love microbiology, but really what got me into this research area is a new love for immunology that I developed in my training. And inflammation is it's really the key mediator of all diseases, of heart attacks, of strokes, of, and now we're seeing an HIV.
Which is an inflammatory
exactly,
disease.
And with that interest in immunology, there really is a gap in our understanding of pediatric HIV, as you said, because the research is a lot more challenging in children to obtain blood samples from them and do this research. But, these children have much more rapid disease progression than adults do, and this disease is attacking them in the context of a developing immune system. And so really understanding how HIV and the developing immune system affects their ultimate outcomes is something that we need to investigate further. So that's how I got into it. I love what I do. I love that it's a mix of working with a clinic in Kenya and getting a global health aspect and supporting a clinic that's doing phenomenal clinical care, but then also taking it back to the lab and doing the basic science work, which I think is very exciting.
Well, I personally wouldn't find that exciting, but I mean, you have to do that. You have to feel that. You have to feel that. Well, what were I know that you're young, but you may have had some disappointments already or challenges that you rather not have had to face. What would that be? It could be personal with the work, or maybe not getting a grant, or whatever. What would that be? How do you like to bring up? I'm not saying a failure. I'm just saying challenges.
Well, I mean, I am pretty new to the field, so I haven't had, thankfully, too many disappointments yet. But I mean, I think for a lot of undergraduates in labs and just young people in labs in general, it's difficult to kind of trust yourself to know what you're talking about, I'd say. And to find the confidence that you actually know the science you're talking about. Because sometimes, like when you're at a conference or when you're trying to publish a paper, it can be intimidating when you're reading like work done by someone who has published hundreds of papers, or your posters next to someone who's done hundreds of these. And you just need to come to the point where you realize, oh, I actually do know what I'm talking about. Like I do know
But you know that the person that's quizzing you knows way more than you do.
Yeah, well, that's true.
So it's a little intimidating.
It is intimidating,
That would
definitely.
be the challenge. But
Yeah.
you got to work through that, and you got to know your stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
That's really what it is. And how about you?
You know, doing research is exciting but also challenging. One, because it's a slow process and you go in with these hypotheses and these goals, but actually getting it done takes a lot of time. So when you're setting up an international cohort, you know, you start not with the endpoint in this data. So the poster that we have today was first set up in 2011. And so coming to this point takes a lot of patience and perseverance. So that's one challenge. And then funding is always a huge challenge. And so to do all of this work, you need funding. And that pool from the NIH has become slimmer and slimmer. And pediatric HIV often is a lot more challenging to obtain funding because oftentimes work has been done in adults and may or may not correlate in children, but convincing people that it's important in children is sometimes
to
hard.
develop either that correlation or not.
Exactly. But you know, I've been fortunate that we were able to do this study. I think we have a lot of promising results and hope we'll be able to keep doing it.
And that would be the positive spin. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. How about you? What's your most exciting
positive
moment?
spin?
Yeah. The most exciting moment or positive moment, whatever it might be.
Well, it's right here, right now.
Really?
I mean, anytime you challenge yourself, I'd say seeing the endpoint, seeing this poster come through, it really is, it makes it all worth it. You know,
Yep.
the assay we did to do SCD163, there were a bunch of times it didn't work out, and it's like a 7-hour assay. And so, you know, those days aren't the best, but then it works out in the long term.
I had to tell him it will work.
Yeah.
Try again.
It's
Try
the
again.
long haul, not the short.
Yeah.
It's the war, not the battle. I don't know what you want to call it.
Exactly.
But so, where do you go from here? Each of you, are you headed down this path, or do you?
I mean,
you don't know, maybe.
There's such a long road ahead of me at this point.
Right.
I mean, it's definitely an interest of mine, infectious disease, HIV, immunology, but there's so many other areas that are also interesting that I don't want to rule out yet, of course, but it's definitely something, like this experience has definitely given me a lot of information to move forward from here.
If I had the science, I think I'd be in this science. I'd be in this. How about you? Are you sticking with it?
So I'm hoping to keep going with this research, publish some results, and hopefully these findings will formulate new questions that we can do new studies.
Right.
Yeah.
There's always a lot of questions. Now you have to decide what will get funded and what's worthy of, in your mind, being funded.
Exactly.
And where do you want to plug your time in that you can really be passionate about what you do?
Right.
Right.
Well, I thank you very much, both of you, for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will see you on TV.
Wonderful. Thank
big
you for the
screen.
opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.